Our guest in this segment, we'll introduce them one at a time here. So that includes Cheryl Roberts, who I first met when she was coaching the Jefferson girls basketball team to a lot of success back in the 90s. Cheryl, good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing great, thank you. 30 years, I guess I've known you now.
Gee, I didn't know I was that old. But anyway, hey.
You look the same, but I've deteriorated amazingly.
He led you into a trap there, Cheryl.
You look the same to me.
Yeah. So anyway, good for you. And you recently retired from the VA?
I did. It was a wonderful career. I had 42 years in VA. So now you know that I'm over 30. So
yeah, you must have started there when you were 2 or something like that. Yeah. And beside you is Charles Cranford. Charles, get a little closer to your microphone if you don't mind, sir. And Charles, good morning. Welcome to the program as well.
And thank you, Rob. I am very happy to be here.
And you are in need of a kidney transplant.
Yes, I am in the situation where I'm looking for a living donor, a person who would be very courageous, to say the least, to do that and to give me a third chance at life, since when I had my first transplant back in 2011, that gave me a second chance at life.
And via telephone, Latrice Price is our guest. She's a senior community outreach specialist. Latrice, good morning to you, and thanks so much for being with us as well.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Latrice, where are you calling in from today?
I'm actually in Virginia this morning.
Oh, how's your weather there in Virginia?
It's a little chilly, but beautiful.
Same here, oddly enough. Yeah, how about that? So, anyway, if we could, Charles, give us a little history of your kidney situation here. You have had one transplant already.
Yes, Rob. I had a very first transplant February 3rd, 2011. So that was my second birthday, as I call it. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I had chronic kidney disease, and I was in need of a transplant, and my beloved wife Amy actually is a living donor. Unfortunately, that transplant is in a position where it's starting to fail now. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was at Johns Hopkins, and they indicated that the best situation for me was to get a living donor, or the other option, of course, is dialysis. Mm-hmm. Dialysis is something that, particularly hemodialysis, is something that I'm trying to avoid. As you know, that can be a very brutal process. Normally, you're connected to a machine about 3 times a week, 4 to 5 hours with each session, and that's something that I would like to avoid because it's very limiting, as you know, to your life.
And what is happening in your body that your kidneys are not surviving?
Well, at this time, as the kidneys begin to, it's a filtering process, as you know, and the filter is beginning to is beginning to fail. And how that manifests itself in me is that there's a lot of swelling in the body, particularly at the lower extremities, as well as chronic tiredness. It gets to a point where I'm just about needing to have a nap, which I'm not accustomed to, but needing that just about every day. And eventually it would get to the point where the toxins are building up just too very much into your body that you will become very sick.
Okay. And what is, and Latrice, please help us out on this as well. What is the process with actually finding a donor and getting a transplant? What is that entire process, including getting on a donor list, like?
So at our agency, we actually don't work with living donation, but I do know Charles from being a very active, supportive volunteer of us for over the past several years. But we work with deceased donation. But there are a few agencies out there that now are where you could list to be, if you're in search of a living donor because you do not have your own donor. Like Charles mentioned, his wife Amy was his donor before, so he may not have anybody that can be his donor this go around, but there are a few new groups that are popping up that you can put your name on a registry to be considered for a living donor. There are people out there that would like to donate to somebody that they don't know, and that's great that they have that now.
And you would deal then with people who, for instance, like me, if I pass away, my driver's license says that I'm an organ donor. Is that where you would come in then, Latrice?
Yes, that's what we do, the deceased donation process.
And how does that work?
So when someone passes away, of course, it's the the rule of the hospital to work hard to save your life. And once they've done everything they possibly can, then they call the organ procurement organization in their area, and that's when we step in, and then we facilitate the donation process. And we'll be matching people who are on the waiting list. So although Charles is looking for a living donor, when he's on the waiting list, there's a potential chance that if he matched a deceased donor, that his name could get called for that deceased donation.
Can I ask why the very specific choice or requirement for a living donor as opposed to somebody from the deceased donor list?
Sure, and that's a very good question. And the reason is that there are over 100,000 people that are on the waiting list, and I am on the wait list currently. But generally, that averages about 5 years waiting. And for me to be in a situation of waiting that long, I would certainly be on dialysis, and then your outcomes become less favorable when you're on dialysis. So Hopkins suggested, living donor is what you need, because that would certainly be able to, that will make it such that you could get that organ a lot sooner and then be healthier.
So once the dialysis process starts, the chances of success of a transplant diminish? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the longer you're on dialysis, because the way the kidneys are working, they are filtering 24/7. But when you're on dialysis, generally, if you're on hemodialysis, it's 3 times a week. So you're only getting a filtering process 3 times a week. So that's a situation where those toxins are building up in your body, and that's not, good to be happening during that time. And going back to Rob's question about the process for a living donor, as I indicated, I have worked with Johns Hopkins and been evaluated. And if one is interested in being a candidate, which hopefully someone might hear this and do that, that would be a matter of calling the Johns Hopkins Transplant Center. Mm-hmm. They are aware of me. You simply indicate that I'm calling on behalf of Charles Cranford. I want to know if I could be tested to see if I'm a candidate as a living donor, and then they would take the entire process from there. And that's entirely confidential. Anybody who wants to do that, I don't know anything about it. So already I've talked with family members, people at my church, and I let people know that it's totally anonymous. It's a heroic, effort on your part. But if at any point a person enters into that process and decides that they wanted to opt out, they can. My wife had that very same option. So it's one of those types of things where we know that it's not for everybody. But through Johns Hopkins and also the National Kidney Foundation, that's another place where they can look and do additional research. And that's just National Kidney Foundation Cares, 888 National Kidney Foundation Cares. You can look at it that way as well.
Charles, there's another dimension of this, and I fall in the category of not knowing anything about being a donor, but there is a fear aspect. What is due to your long-term personal health? Ken Matson, who listens on a regular basis, made a comment that he donated a kidney to his father 25 years or so ago. Okay. And I know Ken, he's a very active person. So that would imply that the donor obviously there's some risk, but is there very much risk for the donor?
It's not, and I say that in all honesty, because if it was, I wouldn't have wanted my wife to do it. Exactly. And at the time, Johns Hopkins assured us that yes, this is not going to affect her life any significantly because there's a removal of the kidney. And indeed, here we are almost 15 years later, and her kidney function is just as good as it would be if it was only one, and that's pretty remarkable. And going back to your question, though, in terms of the outcomes. One thing that you look at is that most times that surgery is done laparoscopically. So there's a very small incision, not the big scar that was 6 inches that used to be maybe 30, 40 years ago. And also, it's good to know that each person, when they enter into this process, they have their own medical evaluation team, separate from me. Separate from my team. So that means that they're looking out for their best interest. They're not saying that we're going to get this kidney for Charles Cranford no matter what. If they have some issues that are going on with them, whether it be high blood pressure, diabetes, or whatever the case may be, something that makes it such that their health is jeopardized, they would be ruled out as a candidate.
And what would constitute being a potential donor? Is it fairly rigorous? I've always thought they had to be matched in so many different categories. But is that true, or is it a fairly broad consideration?
Well, the number one consideration normally is going to be the blood match.
Okay.
You know, if the types are the same. I happen to be O negative, and that means O negative. I can actually have my organ transplanted to any other blood type. But unfortunately, I can only receive from O.
Okay, O negative.
Yeah. So it's but the process itself is somewhat rigorous in terms of what a person would have to do once they volunteer. There's several layers to this because they will have to be checked out physically. Of course, biologically, then they're looked at mentally as well, where they making sure that the reason that they're doing this is all the right reasons. I can't pay the person to do something like this. However, if they were a candidate, one thing for them to know is that actually all the expenses such as the surgery, the evaluation, all those sorts of things are paid by my insurance, not by them. So the vast majority of costs for that would be paid for by me, not by them.
Okay, so if someone listens to today's show and said, I would like to be a potential candidate, be a potential donor, and I have O negative blood, so I've taken the first step, what would be the next step? What would they do? Would they approach the local doctor? Would they call you? Would they call some agency? Who would they call?
Very good question. In that case, it would be calling the Hopkins Transplant Center. Okay. And I have that number here in case they were interested in that. It's 410-614-9345.
One more time, please.
Sure. 410-614-9345.
Thank you.
And at that transplant center, they will give them all the information that they need to start out the process. Again, they wouldn't be in touch with me. Hopkins would get in touch with me. It's just all there for them to look at and to analyze. That's why one of the reasons I say I'm kind of looking for a candidate, because a person, I shouldn't say simply, but because a person raises their hand, which is very much appreciated, that in itself is a courageous act. There's still lots of things that need to be done before they would actually say, yes, you're qualified.
Charles, you are O negative, you said?
Correct.
And I'm looking, it says only 7% of the population is O negative. It is one of the rarest, if not the rarest, blood type.
Lucky me.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Latrice, when a person passes, is there any difference between the health of an organ from a living donor versus a deceased owner as it gets, assuming the transportation of the organ is all fine and intact? Does it matter?
It doesn't. Well, doctors tend to think that a living donor would be a lot better for someone, like Charles has indicated that Hopkins has said to him. But we do have volunteers and people that I know who have had their transplant from a deceased donor for one gentleman just celebrated 50 years of a deceased kidney donation. So we do know that there are some people who have had their transplant for a long time, but living donation is what's usually encouraged from the transplant center when it comes to the kidney donor.
Well, let me ask this. If Charles is O negative, which is very rare, if in fact a kidney on the deceased donors list is an O negative, which is the universal donor, is the first search for an O negative candidate, or is it because it's a universal donor, it goes to whoever's at the top of the list?
I don't know the exact matrix of the algorithm that it does when it comes to like the blood and also the kidneys. Charles mentioned the blood, but they also look at intraden matches within the kidney markers. So we have 6 markers that they look at, right. Which we have 6. And so if a person is 5 out of the 6, they look at that as being like almost a perfect kidney for an individual. So I'm not sure the actual algorithm when it comes to the actual pulling the list of the O negatives, positives, the A's, the B's, how that all works. Yeah,
I was picking up, I had the same thought John did. I would think that since you're O negative, and since there's so very few of them, you would get a head start on that 5-year waiting period, that you would actually be given consideration from an O negative donor, deceased donor, as opposed to waiting for 5 years.
Right. And what I want to add to this discussion, too, is not to have people think that they can't be a candidate for me if they're not O negative.
Sure.
Because one of the things that is out there, and this happened with my wife, as a matter of fact, because we were not blood type compatible either. That is something which is called a paired kidney exchange, or commonly called a swap program. So if someone were to be a candidate and they were actually found to be suitable, but they were not my blood type, what Hopkins or some other institution might be able to do is to find someone to match that particular person, and then find someone else then who will be able to match me.
Certainly.
All right. So that's something I definitely want to be out there, because other people, when I made this announcement at church, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm not O negative." I said, "Well, that doesn't rule you out. There's still a way that we can make this work." So I want that to be out there, because there are so few O negatives.
Charles, what is Hopkins telling you in regards to the time urgency on this?
Well, that's not quite done. They have something which is measures called the EGFR, which is a way of measuring how well your kidney is functioning. And if we just looked at it on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 100, where if your kidneys are filtering as they should be precisely, that would be at 100%. Mine at this time is about 19 and 20. All right, so you can kind of get that as a gauge. And when I would go to a point where I would actually need that kidney, normally it would be we don't know. For me, it's been a slow, gradual drop. So we don't know exactly that, but that's why they had me come in and do the evaluation so we could be prepared. There are times when things just drop off a cliff, and we didn't want to be in a situation where that would happen with me. So we don't actually know, but we know that we need to be doing this now.
Latrice, were you about to add something?
No, I was just agreeing with listening to Charles. Yeah.
Okay.
So the disease, the chronic kidney issues that you had that were solved in 2011, is this a lifetime thing that you've been battling? Is it was it a sudden onset? I'm trying to think. There are people out there that are going to be thinking, I wonder if I have a kidney problem, right? So
and that's a good question. With me and with kidney disease in general, it sometimes could be considered like a silent killer, because many people have kidney disease and their kidneys aren't functioning at a very high level, and you don't know it. Because in my situation, I'm at like 20%, and other than the swelling and the tiredness, I'm operating pretty much like anyone else. There's something which is called crashing into dialysis. That is where people have no idea at all that they have kidney disease. And that's one thing that I'm hoping that this does too, in addition to helping me, just kind of making additional awareness about kidney disease so that people will check themselves out. And they will just be going about life as normal, and then all of a sudden just pass out. And that's crashing into dialysis. Then they go to the ER only to find out that they've had chronic kidney disease and didn't even know it. So that's kind of thing that can happen, that you'll have it and not know it. And in my case, that's the way it was. Actually, I had a physical exam many, many years ago with my primary care physician. And he did basic blood work, which is oftentimes how this is done. And through that blood work said, I see that there's a little protein that's being spilled into the urine. Nothing you need to worry. I was like in my late 20s, early 30s at the time. Nothing you need to worry about right now, but at some point in your life, this is probably going to be a problem for you. And to be quite honest with you, I kind of forgot about that conversation because it didn't affect how I was operating in my life. And it wasn't until many years later that it came up that they think I had something called FSGS, and it's a long medical term. And that was something that seemed to be cured as a result of having this the transplant, because that's not what has me needing a transplant now. Oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but with some people, because Teresa told you about someone who's had a diseased kidney for 50 years, but oftentimes because of the medications that we take, the anti-rejection meds, they both help and they both harm the kidney, because it's a double-edged sword. And with certain people, that process can reduce the life of the kidney. And I think on average, they may be more in, Latrice probably knows this better than me, but maybe 10, 15 years on average. But again, that range can be from immediate rejection all the way up to 50 years.
I have a minute left here. So Latrice, if you could quickly tell folks how they could become an organ donor on your program after they pass away.
Sure, you can. I'll give, since we may be like crossing over into a couple of different states, I'll just give the National Registry. Donate Life America is registerme.org, and that way, no matter what state you're in, you're on the National Registry for organ donation.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you very much. And Charles, 30 seconds. How can folks help you out, or anybody else who might be looking for a kidney from a live donor?
I'm looking for a third chance at life. I'm looking for another hero, if you will, a courageous, selfless person to help. Again, Johns Hopkins Transplant Center, I've given the number for them, 410-614-9345. I'd love for someone to call, see if they would be a candidate, and that would be a tremendous help. To me, I'd like to go on and be very productive to my community, to my church, and not a potential burden. So by all means, please call, and I'd greatly appreciate it beyond words.
Charles,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
coming
much.
in. We appreciate you telling your story.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Thank you all.